We are parents, we are doctors, we are first responders, teachers, and concerned citizens who have found ourselves at a crossroads. We see our freedoms being stripped away, and we can no longer stay silent. We are millions strong, united in a thundering voice and imperative mission that cannot and will not be ignored. We are standing up for the basic human right to raise our own children, earn a living, and make our own medical decisions without the tyrannical overreach that has been forced upon us here in California, across the country, and around the world. We are here to amplify the voices, moving the needle, bringing forth truth, and provide education and resources with tangible tools and expert insights. We are the Unity Project, and this is our podcast. I'm so excited to be joined once again by Dr. Chris Martenson, the Dr. Chris Martenson, a man who needs no introduction, who also happens to be on our Strategic Advisory Council and is doing incredible work. So Chris and I were talking the other day, and it seems to me that Dr. Chris Martenson and I have something very much in common. It looks as though we have offended the Vimeo gods, and we are both put in the penalty box because Vimeo apparently is now the arbiter of truth. So I went back and Chris, I think for the sake of this conversation, because I need to understand who I'm talking to and what you have done to get yourself in the penalty box, I actually went back and took a look at the terms of service for Vimeo. So I thought I'd read them really quickly, and then we'll dissect what you did to get yourself in so much trouble here. So it says, something that contains false or misleading claims, or one, about vaccine safety, or two, health-related information that is a serious potential to cause individual or public harm. I imagine you probably did something to violate that. We know that Vimeo, I'm sure, is probably aligned very much with the Instagram, the Twitter, and the Facebooks of the world. Let's see, something that contains false or misleading information about voting or seeks to obstruct voting, contains claims that are a real world tragedy did not occur. Number two, false claims that a violent crime or a catastrophe, has occurred, or false or misleading information, including fake news, deep fakes. I'm not sure what deep fakes are. Maybe we should talk about that. Propaganda, or unproven or debunked conspiracy theories. And I will say, I actually read something that I thought was really good, that there's no such thing as conspiracy theories. It's just people that are able to string patterns together, probably more proficiently than most. And then lastly, something that creates a serious risk of material harm to a person, group, or the general public, or violates any applicable laws. What did you do, Chris, to get yourself into this much trouble with Vimeo?
Number one, number two, possibly that last one you read. So let's start with number one, though. First up, the context. I've had videos up on Vimeo since 2009, maybe 10. I forget. It's been a long time. And, I pay for it, and I've been using them as a private video service. So for my subscribers at Peak Prosperity, we have things behind a paywall. So that first sentence you read where they said, we want to prevent general harm to the public. Well, we're already in a gray zone here, because this isn't the public. These are consenting people who are paying me to hear what I have to say and think and research about certain topics. So really, honestly, this is a private membership. So Vimeo has said, hey, we're going to charge you money. We'll let you set up a sandbox over here, but then we're also going to have to decide when, where, and how, what's appropriate in that sandbox. So I fell afoul of number one. Also, number two, because I'm a data guy. Number two was the election, that you're not allowed to cast any aspersions on elections. I'm like, whoa, let's be Americans. Of course you can ask questions to verify. And whoever's in charge, has to, by law, answer the question. And they haven't done
Isn't that what they do in Iran? Right. I'm pretty sure that that's what they do in Iran, where they're like that you have an election, but no one's allowed to ask any questions about it. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it's very much an authoritarian move, and it's not even remotely how it should be running. And by the way, that's not a partisan statement. I know Vimeo is taking it in a very partisan way, but it's not. It really honestly pocks on both houses for not giving us, after all these years of very deep questions that honestly, statistically, impossible results year after year after year after year, right? And both parties are complicit in it because neither one has made it platform number one to fix that, And so
Right.
you have to assume they don't want it to be fixed. That's
Right.
fine. But Vimeo has now decided that they're on the side of saying, we don't want anybody questioning these elections at all. And they have some greater good philosophy, right? That's the whole thing behind vaccines. Like, it's for the greater good that we're going to
Right.
prevent people from hearing anything that might cause their poor little heads to,
Yeah.
explode or, get
Right.
questions or anything like that. So
Or question what they see right in front of them.
correct. You wouldn't want to believe your own lion eyes, none of
That's
that
right.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So fundamentally, what Vimeo is it honestly, I only used it as a private server. You want to know why? Because they suck at being a useful content partner, right? So,
Mm,
so at least you go to somebody like YouTube, they
mhm.
have their own problems, but at least they go
Right.
out of their way to serve you up and make sure that they can help you build your audience.
Right.
Vimeo never did that. It was just a place to pay for play,
Mhm.
right? That's
Right.
literally how I was using it. So they come marching in thinking that they're just as important in a public
Yeah.
sphere kind of a way as an
Mhm.
Instagram, as a YouTube, but they're not. These are
Mhm.
private videos and they
Right.
fundamentally didn't understand, and that's fine. They're a company. They can do what they want to do. I'm here to say they kind of sucked at what they did, but this stepping into my private
Right.
sandbox to tell me what I can and can't say within my
Mhm.
own business, which that's their whole business model. Come step into this mall and you'll have a
Right.
store in our mall. And then next thing you know,
Right.
they're coming in saying, but we don't want any customers to come through our doors into your store. So, but make
Mhm.
it work. It's just brain dead. So go woke, go broke. I think, you know, good luck,
Yeah.
Vimeo. They have a broken business model. Yeah. So I see it.
Our crime that was committed was that early on we had done a series of webinars and we video recorded them and we put them up on our website and so that anyone in the general public could access them. And they were interviews with Dr. Malone. We actually probably had several interviews with you, and we were
Mhm.
talking about really early indications of what was happening with the vaccines and we're seeing, all these vaccine injuries. We actually had one interview with Dr. Kirk Milhan and Dr. Robert Malone talking about the rise in myocarditis and the concerning nature that he was seeing in the pediatric population, right? And we had them. Vimeo actually went directly onto our website and took down our videos. So of course we had to quickly retool and get them up under a different type of program. But that's what we did. That was our crime, was that we were apparently spreading misinformation, which is, again, we know we could talk ad nauseum about this, right? I mean, it's such an unbelievable overreach. And I just find it so troubling what's happening right now in every aspect, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's social media. And I almost feel like social media is probably more disturbing sometimes than
Mhm.
mainstream media, because it seems like social media has become the town square, right? And I think you and I were talking offline about this. When Vimeo does this, they put themselves in an editorial position, correct?
It's true because they're saying we support this framing, but not this framing. We'll allow people to
Mhm.
say things this way, but not that way. That's editorial, right? So,
Mhm.
hey, if you want to run the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal or, NPR's, programming, whatever you want to do, that editorial slant does put you in the publishing role. And this is a big problem for somebody like Vimeo because they're over here hiding behind the liability shield of something called the Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, which basically says, look, if you're a platform provider, we can't hold you responsible for everything people say, but you
Right.
can't be in the business of publishing your own content. Now, this
Right.
gets a little, wonky, but I'm going to say that I think there's both positive publishing. I write something, I put it out there.
Mhm.
But if I'm in Vimeo's position, there's negative publishing where I remove a whole block
Mhm.
of voices and only leave the other voices. That's effectively the same thing. There's a sin of commission, but also
Right.
a sin of omission that can be committed here. And that's what they've done. They've taken a very strong editorial stance that, by
Right.
the way, is anti-science. Everything I do, I back up with
Right.
numbers, with papers. If new data comes out, I'll change my mind.
Right.
But all I did in one of these things that they said strike
Mhm.
was I
Yeah.
reviewed the CDC's own data, which then ran afoul of two of their rules. One, you can't
Right.
contradict, the CDC or the WHO. And
Right.
two, you can't say that vaccines are not as good as or are weaker than than natural immunity. So that was it. They said you couldn't say
Well,
that natural immunity is stronger than vaccines. Like,
right.
well, Actually, the CDC says that now. So what are you going to do? Right.
Right. I mean, that's the problem. It's so funny. We had, we went to the california.gov website. And as you know, we went over all those crazy bills that are happening in California. And we took an excerpt from one of the bills straight off of california.gov website, posted it on Instagram. And we were told that we were going to be canceled permanently for misinformation. And it was verbatim language off of the california.gov website. We contested, and of course, we're still on Instagram, but this is so scary, right? What's happening?
Well, it is. And we know now, Laura, that the government, because we see the suit by Schmidt and Landry out of Missouri and Louisiana, the attorneys general, they've sued into the discovery process to look at very specific Biden administration officials, including Fauci, and as well as social media companies, to say, what were you all talking about? Because they had plenty of data, and there were whistleblowers coming out saying the government was leaning in on these companies, saying, suppress that, actually hit that person in the case of some particular individuals, and support this kind of stuff. Now, this is what they wanted to do because they had this greater good philosophy. That's fine. The government can be as crazy as it wants to be, but it can't violate. And by the way, this isn't the 15th or the 14 3/4 Amendment, First Amendment.
First Amendment.
First Amendment. So we know that the government was busy violating that. And this is where I have to question. If I'm going to question, listen, we could go to town on the so-called the censors, the people behind the scene. I like to go to the people behind the scene. So I looked them up, and the censors behind the scene at Vimeo, deeply unqualified to weigh in on anything medical. There's not a single doctor on there. There's nobody even with a science background. There's a guy with blacksmithing, somebody who used to work at Etsy as the director of the whole shebang, right? Somebody's, got a degree in German. That's the nature of what we're up against, right? Basic, non-qualified people weighing in. All right. So that's fine. But, the people I think really, really ought to have their shaken by the scruff here. Where were the lawyers on this? Internal counsel to Vimeo. If you're listening to this, I'm talking to you. You should have been sitting down. That's your job as internal counsel, to go, listen, I hear you. And I know there's a lot of pressure coming from the White House and from other, high-end agencies. And it's kind of sexy to be part of the team. But if we cross that line, we're going to expose our shareholders, our bondholders, to extraordinary risk, because if it turns out that a change of administration comes in and they peer back and we were in cahoots violating the First Amendment, that is a corporate death moment, potentially, right?
That's right. And
we did that knowingly. So where's counsel? Usually counsel, I trust, lawyers are great at a lot of stuff, but they're really good at saying, no, we shouldn't do that. So I don't know where their counsel was on this. It seems foolish to expose yourself to the liability of saying, we took a position. If that position is wrong, we could be exposed. We're possibly at risk of running out of the Section 230 shield, and we might be violating the First Amendment as well, right?
Well, and that's a really good point, because I mean, look, I think a lot of this stuff happens without even getting a review from legal counsel. I think a lot of these I don't know who these people, the blacksmiths and the Etsy directors or whatever they are, who are sitting, with total anonymity behind the screen, saying that they're the arbiter of truth, and they're the gatekeepers of what's everything good and not good. I think they're out there probably acting somewhat autonomously, in the sense that they're sitting behind their desk and they're just making these decisions. But at some point, it has to bubble up to legal counsel. Right? At some point it gets there. And so the question is, when it gets there, what is their response? And like you were saying, you would think, based on all of their legal training, that they would understand this is a bad move on the part of Vimeo, and they would go back and issue some type of an apology and reinstate the account. Like you said, it's not your preferred method anyway, because it's just not a quality, platform for you to use. But you would think at some point, well, like, when does common sense, beyond common sense, when does adherence to the law start to kick in? Right?
Well, not yet is the answer to that, but it's a great question, because I think you're right. My judgment would be, I'm going to guess you're right. There's somebody sitting behind a desk. Somehow, the account bubbles up to their perception. I think real people looked at it, because I got emails from real people saying, here's what you violated. And I said, hey, it's all backed up by data. Can you please tell me exactly what was, afoul of your science, thresholds? And of course you get no answer to that, right? They don't owe you an answer ever, right? So much for customer service. But I do believe that you're right. I can only imagine that somebody was reading this going, this guy isn't saying stuff that it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm getting that squishy feeling, like there's just like their belief system got trounced and they got a little emotional and, they hit the delete button. I think that's what's happening here. I don't believe there's a lot of critical thinking. We can run this conversation out to what an indictment of our scholastic system, or, what do you have to do? How many things have to go wrong for a whole department of people to not understand that they're defending science by trashing science, that they can't understand that, they're declaring that we all have to have complete obedience to the same institutions that just failed us so comprehensively, right? I can't contradict the WHO. These were the people saying, we shouldn't stop flights from Wuhan in January of 2020 because that might be racist, right?
Right.
That's not even remotely what is called for in the WHO framework. I mean, I've read their pandemic response. It doesn't say, we should really try and slow this thing down unless there's a perception of being racist. Then we should just let this let this bug run wild. It's at any rate. So the CDC's made mistakes, the WHO's made mistakes. And by the way, science doesn't start at the top and boil down, right? It always comes from the bottom up. So they're fundamentally anti-American, anti-logic, anti-science, they're authoritarian. And on that basis, I would like to say I wish them well, but I honestly, Vimeo's an aging platform that's kind of run poorly. And, there's a lot of competition. So if anything, counsel or maybe marketing ought to be going, there's this weird phenomenon where these so-called objective truth tellers like Rogan are gaining a lot of followers.
That's right.
And our platform seems to be dying on the vine. What should we do about that? Right. And somehow they can't connect the dots. So that's fine. Listen, businesses fail all the time, but mostly because of a profound lack of strategy. And that's what I think is on display here.
Sure. No, it's clear like that it's a profound lack of strategy, but I also think, it's just, it goes so far into, to your point, just egregious violations. And I should, not clear this up, but be clear in saying this isn't a political thing, right? Like you're not approaching this from you're posting something and you are pushing this very conservative, specific viewpoint. This has nothing to do with politics. This has everything to do with asking critical questions, dissecting information, expecting transparency, trying to display the truth, and being persecuted for it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we've been on the same side of that table more than once, and no good deed goes unpunished. But honestly, the people who got this most right objectively in terms of early treatments and which ones would work and when and how you would apply them, they got persecuted. The doctors and nurses and parents who tried to stand up for fundamental rights that hadn't been taken away. Those rights, rights are rights. Privileges can be taken away. Rights can't be taken away. You have to rewrite the law. And so, but even despite that, we saw people get trampled for exercising their rights. And so once you start to detect that there's that not just that it's happening, but that there's somewhat widespread acceptance for it, that's where you start. That's where, at least for me, my hair starts to stand up on the back of my neck, because now we got to get all historical and we peer back through history and we say, wow, every other time that's happened, this has not been a good period of history, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Witch trials and not actual Nazis out of Germany and, you name it, but these things have happened before. And that's kind of that demonization and that canceling and the righteousness of these people. We don't owe you an explanation. Delete. You are in the wrong. Really? That's fascinating. Etsy worker. So, so they're on the wrong side of history. And I think, that's going to be revealed within time. Right. But I'm glad we're recording this now, because, we get to sort of put this mark in the sand and say, that was the moment where, they really went off the rails when they first took your videos down. That you could just set a timer on the relevance of that company from that point forward.
I agree. And, look, I would love to see every person walk away from Vimeo that's using Vimeo as a result of this. And again, this isn't a right or left thing. It should be an American issue. Every single American that values the freedoms in this country, that values their First Amendment rights, should think long and hard about what the actions are that Vimeo is engaging in.
Mhm.
So other than being clearly a troublemaker, causing yourself to get taken down from
Uh-huh.
Vimeo, what have you been up to these days?
Well, canceling our PayPal accounts for the same reason. I want to talk now maybe about the power that we all have. We
Yeah.
always have this one power, and that's the power to walk away, right?
Mhm.
And to boycott in whatever ways we want to. So I am starting, like, this is a big thing within my company. And, we're putting out, I'm focusing a lot more these days on financial and energy information, because as bad as COVID was for a lot of folks, I believe the coming economic and financial missteps are going to hurt a lot more people.
Yes,
It's a
I agree.
pretty dire situation. But within
Mhm.
that, the only way we can possibly exert our power here is not to, I don't think, storm the Capitol and do all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
to simply withdraw our consent from this stuff. So
Mhm.
I don't have to like Vimeo, but I've withdrawn my consent. I'm going to make a little
Mhm.
stink about it, and I'm going to let people know why I think it's a bad company, and they can make
Mhm.
up their own minds, but not going to use PayPal because they instituted that $2,500 penalty for
Yep.
misinformation, which, oops, oh no, an intern released that by accident. No, just kidding. We meant it. And they call it a
Right.
fine now. Um,
Yeah.
and so, again, I think big tech, we have to admit, has gone way off the rails. And I'm going to include most of Silicon Valley in this, and that whole
Mhm.
bro culture that they got. It's very toxic.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
of
they
course it is.
create things that
Yeah.
fundamentally, I mean, if we had a whole longer conversation, we talk about the damage these things are doing to kids and their dopamine pathways, and they do it on purpose and very knowingly. And it's extremely toxic. And I don't ever see them go, maybe we shouldn't do this. They don't care,
I
right?
I swear we absolutely should have a podcast about this, Chris. That what you just said about the cell phones and about social media and having that in kids' brains and what they're doing. Honestly, it is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous things that has happened in the last decade to human society. It is literally changing the brain chemistry of children
It
and
is. It
teenagers
is. And
and probably some adults.
say what you will, but President Xi almost a year ago
Mhm.
limited the Chinese
Mhm.
children's access to any sort of online stuff to, I think, like an hour a week or
Yeah.
something. Anyway,
Right.
severely limited it because they took a look at it
Mhm.
and said, oh, this isn't good. And we don't want
Yeah.
that sort of damage to accumulate, because that's
Right.
not good for society. And you have to deal with the damage later, all of that. So
Mhm.
but again, these are people who do this, Laura, they do this knowingly.
Yeah.
They have psychologists. Like we saw
Uh-huh.
in terms of the misinformation, the sins of omission, commission, we saw that
Yeah.
Australia, UK, US, Canada, all were running nudge units, some of them out of the
Right.
military. And the nudge unit's
Mhm.
whole job was to make people do something. In this case, it was to have vaccine adoption, or to
Mhm.
accept lockdowns, or to blindly, shun their neighbors and friends and colleagues and family
Right.
if they weren't doing the right things. And they
Mhm.
use these psychological techniques with
Mhm.
extraordinary power and precision. And I didn't see a single one of them at the time say, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Right.
Right.
They
Oh,
did it.
no, it's
And
very intentional. It's
yeah,
absolutely intentional. Wow. So, okay.
so
So,
it's psychotic. So we got to withdraw
Mhm.
our consent from that. So, like,
Yeah.
yeah, no good. No good.
Mhm.
So
Are you,
at any rate,
have you written anything lately? Rumor has it that you have a book, or you were writing a book.
yeah, thanks for
Did
asking.
I make that rumor up?
So this is the original version of the book. This is the crash course. This came out in
Right.
2011. It's
Okay.
published by Wiley, and I just rewrote it, so it's a revised edition. It's
Mhm.
coming out in February. So
Awesome.
that's on pre-order at Amazon. Of course, I'm
Okay.
making videos every single week, and I run
Yeah.
peakprosperity.com. So
Uh-huh.
constantly making content, because this is one of the most extraordinary moments to be alive. And there's so much that has to be understood. That's my job. I
Right.
drink from the fire hose and I distill it. So,
Right.
maybe
And
other
thank God for
people.
people. Well, thank God for people like you, because it's really important. And it is an extraordinary time to be alive. sometimes I have moments where I feel like, wow, it's almost extreme times of despair. But then I get re-galvanized. And I do think that we are changing the trajectory of what's happening in this country. It certainly feels like an uphill battle, but it's critically important that people understand. Look, everyone knows this. If we could stop what's happening with the suppression of our freedom of speech, you and I wouldn't be having these conversations. I don't even know that you and I would know each other, but probably the biggest tool that they have used is this suppression of freedom of speech, which is why you and I felt it was so important to talk about what happened with regard to Vimeo, because they are a part of this new landscape that we find ourselves in. And with regard to PayPal, I will tell you, I actually was about ready to order photos. I had these family photos that I wanted to get printed, and there's this local photo shop in my town, and you can like order the photos online and then pick them up. Well, in order to pay for them, I had to do it using PayPal. So I have not ordered my photos because I refuse to use PayPal. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. People need to stop supporting organizations like this. And I really, really firmly believe that people should take a long, hard look at their user agreement with Vimeo and decide whether or not they want, out of, whether it's sake of convenience or whatever other factor it might be, whether or not they want to continue to contribute to allowing companies to strip away our First Amendment rights, our free speech.
Yeah, to treat us, they're abusive. They're fundamentally abusive. I think what would set you and me and your organization, my organization apart is I fundamentally trust people. I figure people are intelligent. You have your own life. It's complicated. I don't know anything about it really. So I can give you some information that I've condensed. You can do the same in reverse, trusting that, hey, I'll make the best decision I can with it. You will too.
Right.
These folks, the authoritarians, they trust themselves, but they're worried about other people hurting themselves with your misinformation. So it's very dismissive, it's contemptuous, and it's fundamentally very unsavory to me, because I am a free speech absolutist. I believe that you have the right and I have the right to say anything we want. And even if it's objectionable and causes some, emotional reaction, that's fine. That'll happen. But really bad, stupid ideas don't go anywhere, right? They just die on the vine. And so that's how we curate and get better as a culture. But these people are fundamentally saying, no, we have to freeze that, and we'll wait for some committee to decide what the right answer is. And, as we wait for that, if these committees were that smart, how come, we had to run down our strategic petroleum reserve? How come they printed 20 trillion extra dollars in a couple of years and drove inflation through the roof? How come there's no insects anymore outside? There's a lot of things we could look around and go, if these experts are so good, why is all this happening? So, to me, this is the time we should be questioning more than ever. And the good news is, hey, we don't have to use PayPal. Turns out there's, that constriction they put on all these other sort of opportunities. And there's new companies coming up that are dedicated to free speech. I love what Rumble just did. France said, you have to take these videos down or you can't play here. And they said, bye, France. We're not doing that. That's great move.
You got to go to the options. And, what's interesting too, is I think, what's happened in society, especially over the last couple of years, is we've taken and we've created a human psychology in society where we have people that now have permission to govern other people. So, you referenced that you looked up the profiles of the people that are working at Vimeo, right? You've got someone who his or her hobby is blacksmithing, right? So you've got this person who is not qualified at all to have, certainly to weigh in any professional capacity on the science or the data behind what's happening as it relates to the pandemic. But what they have is this moniker that they now wear of someone who is able to police everyone else, right? And that almost is the real virus that's running rampant in human society, at least here in the United States, probably globally too.
Well, don't you feel important and powerful when you have that power over? It's just, small people with power is a bad combination. But I must have misspoke, because that guy didn't have blacksmithing as a hobby. He studied it in college.
So sorry. I stand corrected.
I hope
Yes.
he didn't pay $58,000 a year for that, you know, because you can intern for that for free.
Well, you know, can you imagine? Well, flip the script on that though. Can you imagine how irritated that person would feel if they had videos that they had put out on blacksmithing and the various techniques, and you, as a doctor and scientist, not a blacksmith, said, I think, you know, he said something that's misrepresented. We need to take those down. Right?
Do you know
You'd be
blacksmithing
outraged.
releases particulate matter that can harm people's lungs? I wouldn't want people getting the idea that they should blacksmith. You're right. We could do that. So, well, we're having this conversation just literally the day after the elections. What's the mood on your end over there?
Gosh, I don't even know what to say. You know, look, we don't usually talk about politics here at the Unity Project, but I will say, when Fetterman won, I think I just stopped watching. I'm not sure how you can have someone who's not even a sentient human being, and somehow win an election. It's something's gone horribly awry. Let's say that.
Let's say that. I watched people on Twitter sort of defending that whole thing, and they came out with the tropes like, oh, you're an ableist, and these ableists are saying, you know, and not being sensitive to this gentleman's, you know, cognitive difficulties. I'm like, whoa. Let me tell you what the messaging here is. Would you accept this person as the sole pilot of the jet that you're on? No.
Yeah.
How about as your surgeon? No, probably not.
Right.
How about as your $250 an hour business consultant? Probably not. Right. But senator,
how about as your
that's
child's
fine.
how about as your child's tutor for second grade math? I mean, we can take it even down lower than you know, jobs that require.
Think of the sub message under that, Laura, though. It is, we care so little about your vote that we'll put this guy in, and he's probably overqualified for the position of senator, because even that position doesn't actually really matter.
Right.
That's the subtext to this. But there were people willingly, gleefully going, well, at least he's not Mehmet Oz, who is somehow connected to Trump. So therefore, you know, there are people positively saying yes. And we're very excited by him being elected. But I'm just like, the messaging under that is pretty dark, because it's fundamentally saying you don't matter.
That's right. Yeah. And not only do you not matter, but we just believe that the American people are so what's the adjective that I'm looking for? I was going to say vapid, but you know, that are just so either detached or ill-equipped to express their what's the word I'm looking for, Chris? To express how they want to engage in governing this society as is designed in the Constitution, that they're willing to put a person, and I genuinely mean that when I say he is literally not a sentient human being, and expect that is not just an incredible insult to the American people. And it was pretty shocking to me. After that, I stopped watching. So,
well, maybe that's the point. The point is it is demoralizing, and maybe that is the point. It's like we don't want people feeling like they have some agency in this story. And that's really, that's the fundamental thing. And it loops all the way back to what, say, any censorship we might experience on any platform. You're disempowered completely. There's nobody to call. There's nobody on the other end of the line. It's just this ruling from, you know, the wizard behind the curtain, and you can't appeal it really. And if you do, you don't know what happens to it. So it's very, very, very dismissive, contemptuous, disconnected, and abusive. Fundamentally.
Well, and it is, and because God forbid you actually question anything, like say something like, well, you know, one of the team members here at Unity Project went to vote yesterday, and she sent a message to our group text and said, you know, I guess I can't vote right now because all the machines are down, right? But they did offer to take my ballot, and they would just put it in the mailbox, you know, wink, wink, right? And God forbid you question that, you're told that you're racist. You're told any number of things that have nothing to do with your ability to be genuinely invested and engaged in the democratic process that we have, that, by the way, is an incredible privilege here in the United States, and one that we should all actively engage in and make sure that we are protective of, right? And so it's actually almost our duty to question and make sure that we have election integrity, right? But right now, if you ask about those things, my gosh, you're called every name in the book.
Well,
So.
of course, and you can, that's somebody's strategy. And by the way, I've talked with people who are blockchain experts, and they say, oh gosh, give me a team of 4 people in about 2 weeks, and I can design you a completely secure, totally verifiable election system. It's completely possible. The fact that we have these machines that have known vulnerabilities, which are not vulnerabilities, they're complete security failures. And we've known about them since 2004, and they are unpatched, unfixed. Some of these things have been proven to connect to servers in different countries. I mean, it's just like so bizarrely, like you're supposed to accept that, right? It's kind of like, you know, if somebody walked up to your house and took a knife out and cut your rug in your foyer in half, and then just put the knife in their pocket, and everybody said, what are you making a fuss about that for? That's just, you got to accept that, you know, it's just
right.
That's how it is. That's what that person does, you know?
Exactly. And you just got to accept it. You got to look the other way. You know, and this, again, to me, this is going to sound strange. Maybe it won't to you, but to me, I don't see this as a political issue. I don't see this as a conservative versus Democrat issue. To me, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. Every American should be extremely invested in and want the most transparent election system by state that's humanly possible. And so it's unfortunate because it has become so politicized when it really actually isn't a conservative issue. It's not solely something that conservatives should be concerned about. This is an all-American issue.
It is. And, you know, I heard it expressed really well once. I've interviewed a lot of election integrity experts, and they say, look, when you have an 11% approval rating for Congress and a 95% reelection incumbent rate, that's where you know the problem that you have, right? And there's all sorts of different tricks they use. There's the gerrymandering and the vote rigging and the tabulators that break mysteriously, or, you know, and we have enough examples to say the whole system is shot through and it's broken. We know that, right? But that's why it's just so galling. If you go to one of these places and you have to slip your ballot in, usually on the side, there's a little sign and it says, every vote counts. And you know, that's not true. Some count more than others. Some don't go counted at all.
Especially when you're dead. But
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So this all can be fixed. But to me, it's all part of this one giant integrity issue that we're just lacking. Like this is where the country needs to come back to. And that's why I do what I do around COVID and around the economic stuff, and why you do what you do, I'm sure, is because we have to start having these conversations. I'm all done with people telling me I'm not allowed to have these thoughts in my pretty little head, right? Oh no, you know, not until the New York Times tells you that's a legit issue, right? Screw that, right? It's time for us to stand up, make noise, because I think this is it, Laura. I think this is for all the marbles. I think this is one of those moments in time, 100 years, people look back and go, oh, they went that way. Wouldn't it have been great if they went that way, or vice versa? I
totally agree. This right here is a defining moment in history. And how we react right now and what we do, that will chart the course for the future, and will also be looked upon historically as a benchmark, right? We either get this right or it goes horribly wrong. I couldn't agree with you more.
Exactly.
So thanks for joining us today. All
My
right, everyone,
pleasure. It's been great being here.
Everyone should follow Dr. Chris Martenson. If you're not, I feel like everyone already is, but everyone should. We'll link your Peak Prosperity podcast in our this podcast, and we will also link it on our website. And everyone, look out for his book that is coming out in February. From all of us at the Unity Project, thank you for listening to today's podcast. We hope to continue producing content that amplifies voices, strategies, and resources. Please keep in mind that the Unity Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that relies on the contributions of our generous supporters to fuel the work we do in this movement. If you value our efforts, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution today by visiting our website at www.unityproject.com and clicking the donate button. We very much appreciate your continued support and confidence, without which our work wouldn't be possible.